Welcome to part 7 of the Python Basics tutorial series. We'll begin over for loops. So for loops are just a common way to iterate over the elements of an object. So what this means is, in the first example, the thing I'll be iterating over is a list, as you can see here. And what this will do is that it'll take the first member of my list, it'll temporarily assign it to the variable number, and then it'll execute the code down below. In this case, after I've indented, it'll print the number I assigned, which is 23. Then it'll take the second member of my list, in this case 41. It'll assign it to the variable number temporarily, and then it'll print the number, and so on and so forth until I'm done with the list. After I'm done executing the for loop, I'll print hi. Okay? So this is a very simple for loop, and I'll go into more complex examples as well as different functions and statements you can use with the for loop. Okay, notice that with Python, the code you'll execute in the code block below where you started the for loop, it's indented, and while it may seem a bit unintuitive at first, it encourages more readable code, and over time I really come to appreciate how much more readable my code is because of this. So the next thing we'll go over is the enumerate function. And what this does, it'll return a tuple containing the count, basically how many times you've iterated, which defaults at 0. And this typically mimics the index if you have a list. So for this example here, I've assigned a list of people to the variable friends. And then for index friend in enumerate friends, what this will do is it'll take the first member of my list, Steve, assign it temporarily to the variable friend, and then it'll take the index or the count. In this case, it'll be 0. And then inside the code block of my for loop, I'll print index, in this case 0, and then my friend, in this case Steve. And then it'll go back up to the second member of my list, and then I'll assign it temporarily to the variable friend. It'll take the index or the count. In this case, index equals 1. So it'll print index, and then, which is 1, and then my friend Rachel. Okay? And the reason why it prints the count and not the index is you can iterate over things that don't have indexes, strictly speaking. In a lot of cases, you'll be using a generator in your for loop, and I'll get to that at the end of this tutorial. And we're not going to go over what generators are, just how they function in the terms of a for loop. Okay, so one thing I commonly do with a for loop is I remove punctuation from text, and I'll show you how to do that and why we use a for loop for it. So if I have some sort of text that has a lot of annoying punctuation and I just want to isolate the words, in this case I want to isolate on or a or dark desert and not have to deal with these commas or these quotations or semicolons. I just want the flat out words. Here's how I'll do it. And this is an application of a for loop. So I've assigned all that text to the variable text, and I'll show you this in action. So I have this text, and one important thing to note here is I use triple quotes here because otherwise this would not work with the quotations inside the text itself. Okay, if you don't understand that, that's okay. I'm just going to show you how to remove the text or how to remove the punctuation from the text, and to do this using a for loop. So one thing I mentioned is that anything that's iterable, you can use a for loop. So I have a string, which is essentially an object, and even though strings don't have an iterable method, I can use a for loop with them. So the first part of my string is this hyphen, and what this will do is it'll assign this hyphen temporarily to the variable char, and then I'll use the replace method for my string to replace this hyphen with a space. Since I don't have any hyphens in this text, it's not really going to do anything. One important thing to mention is that when you have a string, strings have different methods attached to them, and all I'm doing is using the replace method for my string to remove some of this punctuation. And I'm doing this using a for loop. Okay? So after I've used the first member of my string and replaced it with a space, I'll go on to the second member, which is a period, assign it temporarily to the variable char, and then I'll basically replace the period with a space. Okay? And as you'll see here, what I did is I basically just removed the punctuation from this text. Okay? And as you notice here, I forgot to put a semicolon here, and then you'll see this is going to go away. Okay? Gone. Okay? So one thing I want to go over and just reinforce are the different methods of strings here. And what the split method does is it basically converts my string to a list, and it'll split each word based on if it has space between. So I have on, that'll be the first member of my list, A will be the second member, and so on and so forth. As you'll see here, I have annoying little empty strings here as different members of my list. And if I want to do something with these words later on, I want to be able to remove these annoying empty strings. And a good way to do this is using a for loop. Okay? And you'll notice here, empty strings have a length of 0. And what I'll do here is I'll filter out the empty strings from my list. There's other better ways to do this, but I'll use a for loop just to show you how to do it. So what I'll do here is, again, I'm converting my string to a list using the split method. And then for each word in the list, I'll temporarily assign it to the variable word. And then I'll find the length of the word. And then if the word is longer than 0 length, as you'll see, empty strings are 0 length, I'll append it to an empty list I made. And what you'll see here is I basically just remove these annoying little empty strings. Okay, and I used a for loop basically just to clean up my list. So another way you could have done this, and partly why I'm going to show you another way, is I want you to get familiar with the continue statement. And what the continue statement does is I basically just have some sort of list here, and if I run into something undesirable, I don't do anything with it, and I'll move on to the next iteration of my list, in this case school. So if I run into something that's an empty string, I don't want to append it to my new list. And continue is really good for just ignoring certain values, but not breaking out of the loop. However, if you want to break out of your loop, if you run into some sort of something undesirable, or you found exactly what you're looking for and you don't need to go through the rest of the list or the iterable, then you use the break statement. And what the break statement does, it'll break completely out of a loop. So if I have, if I split my text and I turn my string into a list here, and if I run into the word desert, then I found what I'm looking for. I'm going to break completely out of the loop. So one sec. As you'll see, I didn't go through the entire for loop. I just broke out of it after I saw the word desert. Okay? And I'll go into a more practical application of break in later tutorials, but for now, this is pretty okay. Okay, one thing I want to introduce to you is the range function. And the reason why I want to do this is the range function is commonly used in for loops. So if you're at an interview and for some strange reason they ask you a question like, write a Python program which iterates through integers from 1 to 50. For an integer that is even, append it to the list even numbers. For an integer that is odd, not off, odd, append it to the list odd numbers. And a good way to solve this is by using the modulo operator. And the way that works is it returns a remainder of some division. So if I had 5 divided by 2, it'd be 2 remainder 1. And modulo will basically just return the remainder. And so in this case, it'll return 1. Okay? And you can do this task using a for loop. And what the range function does is it'll start at some integer you put in the left side of the comma, and then it'll end at the number before the number here on the right. And there's more functionality with the range function, but I just want to go over the basic functionality so you can at least see it. Okay? And I want to go over basically what the difference between range in Python 2 and Python 3. So range in Python 3, which I'm using right here, in a second, is a generator. In Python 2, you basically just get a list from 1 to 50. And there's a couple of different reasons why Python 2 and Python 3 behavior is different. But basically, in Python 2, when you use range, it generates a list. And if you had a really, really long list, it would be very slow to iterate through it. And in Python 3, basically it resembles a generator. It's its own unique type. And I just want to briefly go over that because it'll matter if you're trying to use the range function on your own for other applications. And that's it for this part of the tutorial series. In the next tutorial, we're going over FizzBuzz, which is a very common interview question. And the point of this whole tutorial series is to help people learn Python and be able to use it in their lives. Thanks. Bye.